Om Tabakatamratam Tapta Jivanam Kavibhiriditam Kalmashapaham Shravanamangalam Srimadatam Bhuigananti Bhurirajana. Your words are like nectar, bringing life to scorched souls. They are praised by poets and remove all sin. They are auspicious to hear, wonderful and exalted. Those who spread these words throughout the world are truly giving souls. Welcome everyone to our class on the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. We started last week, chapter 11, with the devotees at Dakshineshwar. It's Monday, June 4th, 1883. If you're following in the book, it's page 231. And Sri Ramakrishna is talking about himself, that this is a great blessing for us. All of these reminiscences and talking about his past experiences. I mentioned last time that he breaks that one of the cardinal rules, don't talk about your spiritual experiences. He breaks that rule constantly for our benefit. That in his case it didn't make any difference. With us, if we get something a little special, we feel very proud of it, we want to tell people, and it's not a very good thing. But Thakur had no ego, and he did this all for our benefit, so we would understand what spiritual experience is, what it really means. Because everything basically comes down to direct experience. There's nothing very interesting about theory. Well, it's interesting, of course, the theory and philosophy, but the whole point of Vedanta is to have that experience on our own. And there are many types of experiences that Sri Ramakrishna had that we won't have. And we don't have to feel bad about it. He was such a rare soul that he had almost every possible variety of spiritual experience. If we get one or two little glimpses of anything that he had, we'll be very happy. But we know the possibility of it, and we know the reality of it, and this is why it's so helpful for us, that it gives us that inspiration, that enthusiasm to do our spiritual practice. So we get a lot of nice reminiscences from Sri Ramakrishna now about his days of sadhana, of spiritual practice. Oh, what an ecstatic state it was. Even the slightest suggestion would awaken my spiritual consciousness. This is a concept, Uddipana. There's a Uddipana we come across many, many times in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, that this was a particular personality trait that Thakur had, that one thing would trigger an association. We also may have it in different ways. With him, it was a completely spiritual thing, that it would trigger, he would see something, it would trigger a certain memory of past experience or something in the scripture, something that would awaken this spiritual feeling of that particular kind in his mind, and he would have that experience. So it wasn't just a kind of association. He would think of one thing or hear something, it would remind him of something else, but he would go into some spiritual mood. It happened so many different times, and he always points to the example of Radha, that Radha, if she ever saw a black rain cloud, that immediately she would think of Sri Krishna, that it was supposed to have been the color of his complexion, and would go into an ecstatic mood. Or if she saw a peacock, because he used to wear a peacock feather in his crown, and then she would go into a mood like that. Chaitanya Deva also. But this was very, very prominent in the life of Sri Ramakrishna. There may be many great spiritual souls that have high realizations and everything that don't have this. It's partly a personality trait of his. And he talks about this being like dry kindling, that if it comes close to a flame, immediately it catches on fire, like that. So this Uddipana really means, that's what it means, to catch fire, you can say, like one light to another light. So he was like that dry straw. If he got close to anything, it would go up in flames quickly. So even the slightest suggestion would awaken my spiritual consciousness. I worship the beautiful. We read this last time, this Sundari, in a girl 14 years old. I saw that she was the personification of the Divine Mother. At the end of the worship, I bowed before her and offered a rupee at her feet. One day I witnessed a Ram Leela performance. I saw the performers to be the actual Sita, Rama, Lakshmana, Hanuman, and Vibhishana. Then I worshipped the actors and actresses who played those parts. Okay, so now this is the new part. At that time, I used to invite maidens here and worship them. And maidens, this will be young girls. This will be Kumaris, huh? Yeah, this tradition in India, especially during Durga Puja, the next to last day of the Puja, that they'll worship a young girl, usually in our order, she'll be 5, 6, 7 years old, something like that, as a special manifestation of the Divine Mother. The idea is that no sexual idea comes into the mind of a girl at that age, so there's perfect innocence and purity. This is so Sri Ramakrishna said, I used to invite maidens here and worship them. I found them to be the embodiment of the Divine Mother herself. This is actually one of the most beautiful parts of the Durga Puja worship, and they get the biggest crowd on that day. And it's just amazing to see these young girls. They must go into some spiritual mood themselves, because they'll sit for an hour, something like that, and without moving, with a beautiful smile on their face. They're told not to do anything. So they just sit so peacefully and calmly, and there'll be actual worship done to them, and ringing the bells and waiting incense and offering flowers and everything at their feet. And so sweet. We know one, she's not a girl anymore, young woman, who was a Kumari. Huh?
Yeah, she came here.
She came here several times. Shivu knows her. She was Kumari twice. Yes. Yeah, it's unusual. 2 different occasions. So, and it's a big thing for devotees of Bellarmine if their daughter is chosen to be a Kumari. It's a great blessing for them. I always had this curiosity to do a study. What happens to these Kumaris, to these little girls who receive worship as the Divine Mother? How does it affect them in later life? Do they have some special spiritual stature or something like that? I think it would be interesting. Of course, I've never done it, but the one girl, young woman who comes here now is very sweet, and it just must be such an experience for them. They get carried in and put on a throne, and it really just as if, and all dressed up with a nose ring and everything, and the beautiful sari, that just as if, and they receive worship that's offered to the image of Mother Durga on other occasions. Sees the living Durga in the form of a small child, Kumari Puja. I only saw it once at Bellarmine. They do it outside on the steps, so many people can see it. It was really fantastic. One day I saw a woman in blue standing near the bakul tree. The Sita was supposed to wear blue. She was a prostitute, but she instantly kindled in me the vision of Sita. So he only saw the thing that would awaken. It was the blue sari that did it. I forgot the woman. I saw that it was Sita herself on her way to meet Rama after her rescue from Ravana in Ceylon. For a long time I remained in samadhi, unconscious of the outer world. So not just that he thought that it reminded him of Sita, but he went into samadhi. So this is that Uddipana for Sri Ramakrishna. Another day, I'd gone to the Maidan. This Maidan is a big open area right on the bank of the Ganges, where all different things, I think when he goes to see the circus, they set it up there. There's a big book fair that gets set up there. There are places you'll see people playing soccer and other things, or just lazing around. Just a big open area. Thakur went several times for different things. One day I'd gone to the Maidan in Calcutta for fresh air. A great crowd had assembled there to watch a balloon ascension. So anything could take place there, all different sorts of things. Suddenly, I saw an English boy leaning against a tree. As he stood there, his body was bent in 3 places. Didn't matter if it was the English boy or not, but it was bent in 3 places. You've seen these pictures of Krishna as the cowherd boy, that he'll be legs in one way and hips in the other way and the top the other way, playing his flute. The Tribhanga, they say. That the vision of Krishna came before me in a flash. I went into samadhi. Once at Shihor. Shihor was the nearby village to Kamarpukur. This is where Hridoy and his family were from. So some of Thakur's relatives were in that area. And now we have Sharada Math, is founded in Shihor. And it's also in the same direction as the Vishalaki temple, right, where Thakur had his first kind of ecstatic experience. Once at Shihor, I fed the cowherd boys. So of course he'll be thinking of Krishna. I put sweetmeats into their hands. I saw that these boys were actually the cowherd boys of Vrindavan, and I partook of the sweetmeats from their hands. Even when Thakur saw these plays in the theater, they would ask him, how did you find them? And he would say this, Nokol and Ashol. He used this term that I saw that the actors and actresses, I saw them as the very people they were supposed to be. That he would his mind would just ascend to that plane. Not that he didn't know they were actors; he would forget that and just see them as they were being portrayed. At that time, I was almost unconscious of the outer world. So this will be a certain period. I don't remember exactly, but in between his sadhana period. I think after he finished the Ramlala period and everything, before this Madhur Bhav. He lived with Mathur Babu, had a big mansion. They were wealthy people in the area of Calcutta called Jan Bazar. And Thakur, he says, Mathur Babu kept me at his Jan Bazar mansion a few days. I think it was actually a year or something. It was months. It was several months at least. Yeah, it was a long period. While living there, I regarded myself as the handmaid of the Divine Mother. So this is a type of spiritual practice. It's a little bit of a mixture of this Sakya Bhava and Madhur Bhava. A little bit Madhur Bhava is very common for, not very common, but those who do it, to consider themselves to be like Radha, the beloved of Krishna, and to get immersed in this idea themselves. Men do it of themselves as the woman who are in love with the man. This so dressing in a sari and everything. So Thakur did it dressing as a woman, only with his attitude as being a handmaid of the Divine Mother. They were worshippers of Kali, I believe, Mathur Babu and his family. So they had an image there. And he says, the ladies of the house didn't feel at all bashful with me. They felt as free before me as women feel before a small boy or girl. I used to escort Mathur's daughter to her husband's chamber with the maidservant. So whenever Thakur did anything, he did it literally. This was another thing. If he wanted to practice the spiritual ideal of looking upon God as the lover, and to himself, or as the beloved himself as the lover, he would dress and act that way. When he followed the attitude of the Dasya Bhava, looking upon God as the master and himself as the servant, then he really tried to feel that he was Hanuman, Mahavir, and he would tie his cloth so that part of it hung in back like a tail, and he would hop from place to place and climb trees and live on bananas. All these, yes, to create that in his mind, but also this was his natural tendency. He did everything very literally. He used to say that whenever he did any practice, for some years or some period he did the Vaishnava practices, he would dress the way they did. They wear something called bhek, some long kind of gown type of thing. And so he did that whenever he practiced during his Islamic period. He even wanted to take food cooked by a Muslim to feel that he was really part of that tradition. The proprietors of the temple wouldn't allow it because it would have made it, they were very orthodox. But they allowed him to get a Muslim cook to direct a Hindu cook to cook according to the way the Muslims do their spices and things like that. So he did everything very literally. He would remove all of the pictures of the gods and goddesses because this wasn't an Islamic tradition and everything. So this is the way he, and how he could identify with people. He used to say that if you want to know what someone is like, then live like they do, eat like they do, dress like they do all of those things. When I was traveling through Asian countries and things, I didn't know anything about Vedanta at that time. But I like to do that. I would dress the way that the people did and eat the way, and try to learn a little bit of the language. Otherwise you feel like an outsider and a stranger. You don't get to know them. And they see you make a little attempt to learn a few words of their language, how happy they are and how they receive you and treat you like one of their own. If you go there and just as an outsider and just staring at everyone, this and that, then they won't react that way. So it was very nice teaching. Swamiji says in one time, this was Thakur's way, that he lived like them and he acted like them and did everything like them. So, yeah, I mean, it sounds strange to us to think that Sri Ramakrishna wearing a sari and dressing like a woman and everything, but it was accepted in those days. This was a type of practice, not terribly common, that in order to feel, for those especially who worship Sri Krishna with his Madhur Bhava, to feel that they're the beloved, to identify with Radha, just as for the Vatsalya Bhava, they try to identify with Mother Yashoda, with the actually stepmother of the baby Krishna. Even now, the slightest thing awakens God consciousness in me, Uddipana. Rakal used to repeat the name of God half aloud. At such times, I couldn't control myself. It would rouse my spiritual consciousness and overwhelm me. There's one way of doing japa. Some people will just half mutter. Some people will do it without saying anything but moving the lips. Sometimes he says that he would see Rakal doing that. So you can't hear anything, but you can tell that they're repeating it. Other people don't, of course, there's no way of knowing. They don't move the lips, they don't say anything. And then there are others who, if it's the different type of tradition, the Hare Krishna tradition, they'll do it loudly and sing it. So there are all different ways of doing it. Sri Ramakrishna went on describing the different experiences he had had while worshipping the Divine Mother as her handmaid. He said, "Once I imitated a professional woman singer for a man singer. He said my acting was quite correct and asked me where I had learned it. The master repeated his imitation for the devotees and they burst into laughter." After his noon meal, the master took a short rest. Manilal Malik, an old member of the Brahmo Samaj, entered the room and sat down after saluting the master, who was still lying on his bed. This Manilal, he was a member of the Brahmo Samaj, but he came to Sri Ramakrishna quite often. So he must have had some special devotion towards him. There were different classes, those of the Brahmos who had some devotion for Sri Ramakrishna, those who, as soon as they met him, they gave up their Brahmo Samaj. And in Narendra's case, Narendra, or Swamiji, Swami Vivekananda, one of the really outstanding traits of Swamiji was loyalty. If anyone did anything nice to him, or he had a friendship with somebody, he always remembered. He was so loyal to even people that nobody cared about. There's a Hazra and some others that were even criticized for it. So I have a feeling with the Brahmo Samaj that he felt some type of loyalty. He had joined and signed the pledge. So even after meeting Sri Ramakrishna, he continued to go for some time. So there's Manilal Malik. We'll find him on several occasions coming to Sri Ramakrishna. So Manilal Malik, an old member of the Brahmo Samaj, entered the room and sat down after saluting the master, who was still lying on his bed. Manilal asked him questions now and then, and the master, still half asleep, answered with a word or two. Manilal said that Shivanath admired Nitya Gopal's spiritual state. Okay, now Shivanath, the Shivnath Shastri, he was one of the main, I guess he was an acharya also, but one of the main leaders. The acharyas were often just hired people. The Shivnath was higher up. He was kind of right-hand man, I guess. And then after Keshav passed away, he more or less took over. I think he was kind of head of that. He was a funny case because Thakur always praised him and seemed to love him so much. And yet the Shivnath, he appreciated Thakur, but also thought that two special things. One, he was a little bit off his rocker. That he had behead, that he had thinking of God too much, that he had become a little bit off. And second thing was that he had this idea that actually Thakur changed more after meeting Keshav than Keshav changed after meeting Sri Ramakrishna. That before that, he was too much against the householder life and this and that, and after meeting Keshav, that his views became a little more normal and everything. When the truth is that Keshav is the one who changed more, and the whole Brahmo Samaj changed more after meeting Sri Ramakrishna. One thing they say, he gave them the gift of the name of mother. That before that, everything was just Brahman. It was very kind of dry and like that. But then many of the songs afterwards will be addressed to mother, and this idea of ecstatic love. That's why that song, Amai Dema Pagul Kore, the mother, make me mad with thy love. That Thakur liked it so much, and this Trailokyanath, one of the Brahmos, that this shows that this is not a song that they would have written years earlier, before meeting Sri Ramakrishna. This shows that influence that he had on them.
They had an obsession for the idol worship.
They, of course, they really couldn't bear this idea of worshiping God in an image. They called it idol worship. This was partly because they were almost all Western educated, and Western educated in those days really meant being educated in a Christian missionary school, because that's where they could learn English and that's where they could learn Western subjects and things. So they heard constantly from the British, or it wasn't always British, but some of the missionary schools were run by people from other European countries or Ireland, or even some American also, that this was the worst sin, idolatry. So they kind of picked up on that, and they really, you had to sign a pledge if you joined the Brahmo Samaj that you would not go into a temple and bow down and worship an image like that. That this was anathema to them. Manilal said that Shivanath admired Nitya Gopal's spiritual state. The Nitya Gopal is another interesting case. Yeah. That he was a young man. He was in his early 20s at that time, probably, and very simple and childlike. You ask him a question, he would answer just one or two words, but he would go into different ecstatic moods. Sri Ramakrishna sometimes said he was in the state of the Paramahamsa, and yet he never became part of the inner circle, really. And he later had a little bit of a following, and there's even at least one temple with his image there. What is it? Mahanirban Mandir.
And that is in Rajbihari Avenue.
Rajbihari Avenue?
Yeah, it's
Really?
still there, very big.
Really?
Near Goriahat area.
Well, I lived there.
Really?
Well, Kojba.
Near there. It's just opposite to Triangular Park. There is a park.
Okay.
Just opposite to that.
Okay. Yeah, so...
and he was also in Jogodhan, right?
He used to live, he kind of didn't have any place to stay. He wandered. He and Tarak, Swami Shivananda, the two of them. Ram Chandra Datta was very generous that way. He allowed them to stay in I don't know, just Jogodhan or maybe in Calcutta. He had two places.
He took some of the, I think, hairs or ashes after Thakur's death.
Oh. He may have taken some of the relics after his death. Okay, you can look it up in the at the end. It'll tell more about him.
And he was born in a very big family.
He was born in a big. Oh, okay, a well-to-do family.
Very well-to-do. In Ahirutola. Ahirutola is a place on the North Calcutta.
Oh. The master asked him in a sleepy tone what they thought of Hazra. Yeah, Hazra was another character. That Hazra and Swamiji became big buddies. But Hazra, he used to sometimes criticize Sri Ramakrishna, and it was had a very high opinion of his own spiritual attainment, and put on a show, always sitting outside telling his beads and doing his japa. And he had a little debt, so every once in a while he was hoping people would offer to give him some money, or he would ask for money. Then Sri Ramakrishna sat up on his bed and told Manilal about Bhavanath's devotion to God. And another strange thing, there's Bhavanath. The Thakur loved him so much, had such a high opinion of him. And then a marriage was arranged for him. Then Thakur was even more impressed. Oh, you see, he and his wife only talk about God. And when Thakur says, she's your wife, have a little fun, he would say, no. How can you say that to me? That will only. The next thing you know, they're having kids, and he's not coming around much, and everyone is saying, "Oh, what happened to Bhavanath?" Thakur is very ill in Kashipur, and everyone is a little surprised. He and Narendra were very good friends, and Thakur used to pair devotees up sometimes, because he knew that they had a similar spiritual ideal, or they complemented each other, or they would be helpful. And encouraging each other spiritually. So they were kind of a pair. And then even Swamiji said, yes, look at Bhavanath. How he doesn't have that same tejas that he used to have and everything. And we don't know why these things happen. Thakur called him a Nitya Siddha, even in Ishwara Koti in the early days. He got demoted. And Purna became the sixth one. Another interesting thing. Yeah. So there are many things that we don't have answers to, many questions.
And nothing much is written on him, right?
Bhavanath. No, I mean, there'll be something in the back of the book also. Then Sri Ramakrishna sat up on his bed and told Manilal about Bhavanath's devotion to God. Master, what an exalted state he is in. See how he's praising him so much. He has hardly begun to sing about God before his eyes filled with tears. The very sight of a Harish made him ecstatic. The Harish, Thakur somehow let him stay at Dakshineshwar. He was a married man. family and everything, but somehow Thakur thought he was very sincere and he allowed him to stay for some. Other times, if someone was a married devotee, he would say, "What? You expect people from the neighborhood to feed your family? Go back home and look after them." But for some reason, Harish got to stay there. I don't know for how long. The very sight of Harish made him ecstatic. He said that Harish was very lucky. He made the remark because Harish was spending a few days here now and then away from his home. Sri Ramakrishna asked M, "Well, what is the cause of bhakti?" Not that he was expecting an answer from him, but he's raising the topic. Why should the spiritual feeling of young boys like Bhavanand be awakened? M remained silent. Master, the fact is, so then of course Thakur will give the real answer. All men may look alike from the outside, but some of them have fillings of condensed milk. Yeah, there's a certain type of sweet in Bengal, a little bit like a crepe, and they roll it up like an egg roll. So on the inside, you can't tell what different types of fillings are there. Yeah, some may be very sweet, coconut and sugar and everything, and some may be made from dal and other things. What is it called? Kirepor. But some of them have fillings of condensed milk. Cakes may have fillings of condensed milk or powdered black grams. So that won't be, so sweet. But they all look alike from the outside. The desire to know God, ecstatic love of Him, and such other spiritual qualities are the condensed milk. Now, what Thakur is saying is that a lot of these things have to do with our samskaras. We're born with certain spiritual qualities or worldly qualities. Of course, a mixture. That these are things that are very hard to tell by looking at somebody from the outside. And when and how these things awaken, they may awaken from very childhood, it may come later in life, but very hard to judge just from the outside. So we ourselves don't know why we may feel a tendency towards some types of enjoyment, some types of spirituality, different things. We may not be able to trace it back to any logical thing. These may be just from, we're born with these tendencies from past lives or God knows what. So Thakur is really saying that in a case like Bhavanath, it would be hard to say exactly, but from the outside we can't really know. Sri Ramakrishna spoke reassuringly to the devotees, Master to M. Some think, "Oh, I am a bound soul, I shall never acquire knowledge and devotion. But if one receives the Guru's grace, one has nothing to fear." Now he'll tell a very nice story. This is a story that Swamiji liked very much. Swamiji told it very often in the West, with a little bit of a difference. When Sri Ramakrishna tells the story, he does it in the context of the importance of the Guru. When Swamiji tells the story, he tells in the context of having that inner divinity within us that has to be awakened. It's the story of the, and Thakur's telling is a tiger and goats. When Swamiji tells us it's a lion and sheep. But it's the same story. So but if one receives the Guru's grace, one has nothing to fear. Once a tigress attacked a flock of goats. As she sprang on her prey, she gave birth to a cub and died. The cub grew up in the company of the goats. The goats ate grass, and the cub followed their example. They bleated, the cub bleated too. Gradually, it grew to be a big tiger. One day, another tiger attacked the same flock. It was amazed to see the grass-eating tiger. Running after it, the wild tiger at last seized it, whereupon the grass-eating tiger began to bleat. The wild tiger dragged it to the water and said, "Look at your face in the water, it is just like mine." Amyoja tuyota. Thakur had a way with words. He liked all of these cute little expressions and rhyming things and everything. That's what it is? Yeah.
Yes.
Amyoja tuyota. Yeah. Amyoja tuyota. Yeah. And look in the words. You see, what I am, you are. There's no difference between the two of us. This is what the Guru will say. We look at the Guru and say, how wonderful is soul and everything. And we see divinity shining within. And Guru will say, you're the same, only you don't realize it. Look at your face in the water. It is just like mine. Here is a little meat. Eat it. Saying it, he thrust some meat into its mouth. But the grass-eating tiger would not swallow it and began to bleed again. Gradually, however, it got the taste for blood and came to relish the meat. Then the wild tiger said, now you see there is no difference between you and me. Come along and follow me into the forest. So there can be no fear if the Guru's grace descends on one. He will let you know who you are and what your real nature is. So he's stressing the idea of the Guru. Swamiji stressed the idea that we're all lions or tigers, that we have that tremendous strength and fearlessness. The lion has no enemy. This Pashuraja, the king of the forest. And they have nothing to fear. So Swamiji always, he liked that idea. That's why this Vedanta Keshari, the magazine that's published out of Chennai, it means the lion of Vedanta. He used to repeat that verse. Nirgacchati jagat jagat pinjaradi vikeshari. That we have to jump out of that cage of the body and everything, just as the lion will break out of this bamboo cage. They won't be able to hold it. So we can't let the limitations of our human personality and all of that prevent us from realizing that infinite strength we have, that we're lions. There's a nice story about Swami Turiyananda and Guru Das Maharaj. Guru Das Maharaj was the Dutch-born, later became a Swami, of course, a devotee who lived in the United States and was in Shanti Ashram with Swami Turiyananda. But this time they were in New York, if I have the story right. And they were walking in Central Park, somewhere near the zoo. And he started telling this Guru Das Maharaj, let the lion out of its cage. Let the lion out of its cage. And people are looking at him like, oh, they're going to open the cage of the zoo and let the lion out. They couldn't imagine what was happening. But so this idea, and this is, I've mentioned this before, this is one thing I love about Swamiji. For him, the self, the Atman, the real self, wasn't just this pure consciousness. It was a source of strength, of fearlessness. That if we realize the self, we become absolutely fearless and so full of power and strength that we feel we can do anything and that nothing can touch us, that we're beyond any chance of the world being able to impose itself on us, that we can withstand anything, we can bear anything. This is his concept of the self. It's very, very beautiful, very much richer than just this idea that the witness and pure consciousness and all of that. Because if we realize the real nature of the self, we become fearless. We feel that strength within. So Swamiji told this story with a little bit of a different twist to it. That the main thing was not the role of the Guru. The main thing was knowing that we're not sheep, that we don't have to go around fearful of everything, that we're really lions, that we can go and assert ourselves and feel that infinite strength and power within, which is from the divine presence within. If the devotee practices spiritual discipline a little, the Guru explains everything to him. Then the disciple understands for himself what is real and what is unreal. God alone is real, and the world is illusory. Now, this is my pet peeve, huh? Many of you know that. This translation of this anitya, and there it's anitya. Yeah. Thakur very rarely uses, normally we say mithya is illusory. Thakur very rarely uses this term mithya, that almost always uses the term illusory. So it really should say God alone is real and the world is transitory, right? That'll be a little more. The only reason I mention this is that Thakur didn't like this idea that this world is illusory like a dream. Now we may say it's dream-like in the sense that it's fleeting and there's nothing to hold on to and all of that, but not literally in the sense that there's no objective reality to this world. In a dream, it's only me. I'm the only one who's really experiencing everything. He didn't like that idea. He recognized that this is a certain. There may be some who follow that, the jnani, that the waking state is just as unreal as the dream state. That type of idea. The term unreal in Vedanta means transitory. That this is the definition of reality, is that it exists in the past, present, and future. It's something unchanging. The real has to be unchanging. So for Thakur, this asat, unreal, and anitya, transitory, these meant more or less the same thing. Then he tells another story. One night a fisherman went into a garden and cast his net into the lake in order to steal some fish. The owner heard him and surrounded him with his servants. They brought lighted torches and began to search for him. In the meantime, the fisherman smeared his body with ashes and sat under a tree, pretending to be a holy man. The owner and his men searched a great deal, but could not find the thief. All they saw was a holy man covered with ashes, meditating under a tree. The next day, the news spread in the neighborhood that a great sage was staying in the garden. People gathered there and saluted him with offerings of fruit, flowers, and sweets. Many also offered silver and copper coins. How strange, thought the fisherman. I am not a genuine holy man, and still people show such devotion to me. I shall certainly realize God if I become a true sadhu. There is no doubt about it. I never really understood the moral of this story, except that people are very gullible. Yeah.
There's a lot of fake gurus.
Yes. But see, Thakur really felt that even if one pretended to be a holy person, that could make one really feel like it. He told the other story of the man who was playing the role of a sadhu in one of these jatras, one of these plays, and he did it so well that someone wanted to give him a few rupees. And when he offered the rupees, and the man turned his head and walked away, kind of with a disdain. Then later he went and he changed his clothes and he came out, he went up to that man and said, "Oh, you wanted to give me something." And he said, "I offered it before and you didn't take it, now you want it." He said, "Then I was dressed as a sadhu. Sadhu can't take any money." So what Thakur is saying, that even if we're just pretending, sometimes that pretending, the mind can understand what it's really like to be a sadhu, and we can really feel that. Anyhow.
That story of Valmiki.
Valmiki.
Yeah, who was a dacoit.
Yes.
And then turned into this by repeating the name Mora.
Mara became Rama. If a mere pretense of religious life can bring such spiritual awakening, you can imagine the effect of real sadhana. In that state, you will surely realize what is real and what is unreal. Again, anitya? Yeah. So what is real? Unreal I don't mind so much. Illusory bothers me a little bit. Unreal, that means, and sometimes Thakur says vastu and avastu, bostu, avastu, there is substantial and insubstantial. What is of value? I take it that way more, that state you will surely realize what is worth doing in life, what is of the ultimate value in life, and what is just for some passing enjoyment. Shreyas and preyas. God alone is real and the world is illusory. One of the devotees said to himself, is the world unreal then? What does it say? So still it's saying the same with the anitya. Transitory. Of course the world is transitory. No one will doubt that. But in the sense that is it something to be given up? This is the real question. Is it something to be given up without any real value to it? That we're wasting our time if we lead a householder life and have a career and earn money and all of that? Is the world unreal then? The fisherman, to be sure, renounce worldly life. What then will happen to those who live in the world? Now, one of the devotees said to himself, this means M. Otherwise we won't know. I remember when I first read the gospel, I was so confused about that. Now, how does this guy know what one devotee had said to himself? Then, after reading it the second time, they understood. So sometimes the M will just refer to himself as a devotee, especially in cases when he's thinking. Now, this was not an idle question for M. He really had this dilemma within. He really tortured himself over this question of whether to renounce the world or continue in worldly life. Part of the reason was that he was not happy in his family life. Not happy in his family life, partly his father and his brothers and everything. His wife went almost mad with grief when the child died, son died and everything, so not happy there. The other thing was a very sincere longing for God realization, a very sincere longing to renounce everything. Such tremendous, not jealousy, envy or appreciation for the young monks who renounced everything. And a great desire to live that type of life. And approached Ramakrishna on different occasions. Thakur said, no, it's not for you. That you be the example of a householder living in the world like a sannyasi. And he did that. He spent so much of his time alone, even sometimes sleeping with the homeless people. He would go just to feel what it's like not to have anything. And he was a great soul. But so this is not just an idle thought. This is a very, very deep question for M. Is the world unreal then? The fishermen, to be sure, renounce worldly life. What then will happen to those who live in the world? Must they too renounce it? Sri Ramakrishna, who could see into a man's innermost thought, said very tenderly, suppose an office clerk has been sent to jail. He undoubtedly leads a prisoner's life there, but when he is released from jail, does he cut capers in the street? Not at all. He gets a job as a clerk again and goes on working as before. Even after attaining knowledge through the Guru's grace, one can very well live in the world as a Jivanmukta. So, this God realization is a question of direct experience. It's not a question of external things. Of course, a householder or a monk, doesn't matter. They have to have that tremendous longing, and they have to do their spiritual practice and all of that. Householder can do it also. But what Thakur is saying is not necessarily to renounce the world to do that, and after realization, also not necessarily to renounce the world. One can go back and live with the family as a Jivanmukta. A Jivanmukta, this is somebody who has attained the goal. Literally, it means free while living. Free in this very lifetime. This is one of the differences between the Vedantic tradition, which means also Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, and others, that this concept is of attaining the goal of life while living is a very strong thing. In most of the other religions of the West, we can say, when we talk about salvation and everything, we can attain it here. That means we get our ticket here, but it's really something for after we die. It means going to heaven. Basically, it'll mean salvation, going to heaven, and because there's no idea of rebirth anyhow. So going to heaven rather than going to hell, I guess we can say. But here the goal is really to have that experience, that absolute experience of freedom and the experience of God realization in this very lifetime, and after we have that experience, to live in the world. The concept of Jivanmukta depends on this idea of prarabdha karma, that two things are running parallel. One is our spiritual life, and the other is the physical life. And the spiritual life, we can have our realization, the physical life will continue. The classic example we have, of course, is the potter, and the potter's wheel, and there's the clay on it. When the clay is turned into a pot and everything is done, then that pot is removed. So that's kept separate, and the wheel continues to spin just on its past momentum. But the potter doesn't spin it more. He doesn't create more karma, but it'll keep going and gradually will stop just when the momentum stops. So the physical body will live due to the momentum of our past karma, but the soul is something separate now. The soul is something unattached, perfectly free. It's still connected with the body, of course, but free from any false identification with the body. Thus did Sri Ramakrishna reassure those who were living as householders. Manilal, Sir, where shall I meditate on God when I perform my daily worship? Now, this was a very common question in those days. It didn't mean, should I go to a temple, should I go to a shrine room, this and that. It meant where to focus one's concentration. Master, why the heart is a splendid place. Donka mara jayega. There's another funny expression. There's when some big celebration comes, there'll be beating of drums and things, and the king is coming. There'll be a procession, they'll bang their drums and do all sorts of things because some big shot is coming, something like that. So Thakur likes to use that expression for some reason with regard to this particular question. So that it really means that this is something that is praised very much in the scriptures and is a wonderful place to do it and everything. So he recommends that. That means that when we try to picture God dwelling within, we picture God dwelling within the heart, not the physical heart, within this cavity somehow. Try to picture God dwelling within, facing outward, and that we're also able to look and sit face to face, something like that. It's a little bit of a complicated thing. I spent a long time on this with the talk on the ABCs of meditation, if anybody is interested. But the heart is a splendid place. Meditate on God there. So all the question of using the power of imagination to project the image somehow of the chosen deity. If we meditate on Rama, or Krishna, or Sri Ramakrishna, try to picture dwelling within the heart. We see many of the pictures of Hanuman tearing open his heart, and we see Rama, Sita, and Lakshmi there like that. Manilal, a member of the Brahmo Samaj, believed in a formless God. Addressing him, the master said, Kabir used to say, God with form is my mother, the formless God is my father. Whom shall I blame? Who shall I adore? The two sides of the scale are even. So, not a question of which one is better. It's the same reality showing itself in two different ways. During the daytime, Haladhari used to meditate on God with form. Haladhari was another one of the characters who stayed at the Dakshineshwar temple. Was one of the priests and everything. Not a relation to Thakur, but from a nearby village, from someone from that area. Yeah, it was all of the priests either were family members of Thakur or acquaintances or from the same area. That they would be the ones, if they needed a new priest, they would recommend somebody and they would come. Whichever attitude you adopt, you will certainly realize God if you have firm faith. You may believe in God with form or in God without form, but your faith must be sincere and wholehearted. Shambhu Malik used to come on foot from Bagh Bazaar to his garden house at Dakshineshwar. His house was very close. I don't know where it is, but Thakur used to walk to it.
Yes.
It was on the main entranceway, when you walk in. One day a friend said to him, "It is risky to walk such a long distance. Why don't you come in a carriage?" At that, Shambhu's face turned red and he exclaimed, Shambhu was one of the Rashadars, that he was very helpful in supplying money and goods and things for Sri Ramakrishna. And Thakur would visit him in his house, in this garden house. So Shambhu's face turned red and he exclaimed, "I set out repeating the name of God. What danger can befall me? Through faith alone one attains everything. I used to say, I shall take all this to be true if a certain person or if a certain officer of the temple garden talks to me. What I would think of would invariably come to pass." Yeah, there's a song that Thakur used to sing. I don't know if this is it. Durga, Durga, Durga bole, Jeba pote chole jai, Shulo hosto, Shulo pani, Rokka korentai. If one leaves, sets out on the road, taking the name of Durga, Shiva himself will protect you with his trident in his hand. I'm mentioning this because we had a devotee couple, very, very nice people. He passed away, his wife is still living, that always did this, and most of us do. We're going out or getting in the car or something, this becomes a habit, say Durga, Durga. Repeat the name of Durga so that everything will be fine. So they did this one day and they got robbed. Yeah. So she came to me, Sunanda, she came to me and said, what happened? How did it not work? She was very, very very simple and with that faith. We repeated the name of Durga and we got robbed. They got mugged somehow. So I didn't know what to say. He said, maybe you were protected from getting murdered. Who knows? There's a question of faith. Anyhow, we'll stop here. And all of these stories that Thakur tells are also very helpful when we sit for meditation. We can remember some of the incidents in his life and marvel at the way his mind worked. Not just his spirituality, but his mind. It was such a brilliant mind, and this ability to just go into spiritual moods. This Uddipana, really a wonderful thing. A wonderful thing. Okay, let us stop here then. Om Niranjanam Nityamanantarupam Bhaktanukham Bhadhuda Vikraham Lai Ishavataram Parameshamediam Tam Ramakrishnam Shirasa Namama. We bow our heads before Sri Ramakrishna, who is stainless, of infinite nature, whose heart melts in sympathy for his devotees, who is an embodiment of the Divine and the Supreme Lord, and ever worthy of our worship. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. Thank you.
Swamiji, this